Hello and welcome to Fit After 40. Our guest today is Seth Redelheim. Seth is a professional coach and the director of racket sports at the Westlake Country Club in Augusta, Georgia. Prior to that, he has almost 20 years of experience coaching in clubs in Nashville, Chicago, and Atlanta. He holds certifications from the Racket Sports Professionals Association and the Professional Tennis and Pickleball Registry. He is a national trainer for USTA's cardio tennis program and was the 2022 USPTA Southern Professional of the Year. Seth, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thanks, Chris. I'm doing great. Good to be here.
Welcome.
So let's start with your story. What's your background in tennis? How did you come to this sport, and what made you want to pursue coaching?
Well, so I started out in racquetball and started playing racquetball with my father at a very young age, competing in tournaments, traveling around the country. Had a top 10 national ranking in racquetball when I was like 7, 8, 9 years old, all the way until I was about 12. And then the discussions came up about college scholarships, and there are none for racquetball. So I drifted into tennis then, and then played very competitively through my teens and coached in my high school summers and things like that, and had a really good mentor at a club in Nashville named Eric Hartman, who not only kind of built my love of the game, but also made everything a lot of fun and was a great sort of mentor for me. And so then when I drifted away from the game for a few years and kind of took a break and had some fun and did some other things, that were not fitness related at all, I came back to coaching when I moved from Nashville to Chicago, and actually walked into a tennis club thinking I was going to join and make some friends. And I happened to walk into the busiest teaching club in the world. It was a 18 court facility with 35 full-time coaches and just an unbelievable, sort of factory operation. And so I, sort of look around and said, give me an application, and kind of fell back into it. And again, had some incredible training and some great mentors there who, sort of opened this up as a career path. And so it's been an incredible journey since then. But I've, had some great positions and have been fortunate enough to really fall into the industry, with both feet and wholeheartedly.
Nice. Now, I'm certified as a personal trainer, and we have a lot of trainers on the show. What is involved with becoming a tennis coach as opposed to just a strength and conditioning coach or a more conventional type of personal trainer?
Right. Well, and I love that you have a certification. That's something that, people would ask that if they were looking for a personal trainer, people would ask, are you certified? Unfortunately, when people look at tennis coaches, they don't always ask. That's sort of a battle that we've been fighting in our industry for 50 years, is what makes a good coach versus a good player, and what is a professional versus just somebody who knows the game and has played. So there is, we have two major professional organizations that certify coaches, the Racket Sports Professionals Association, the Professional Tennis Registry, are the major two. And then the United States Tennis Association, USTA, accredits both of those organizations and then sort of manages a lot of the other aspects of the industry. So it is, there's a lot of continuing education. There's a lot of, sort of fellowship between coaches. And I mean, we learn from each other, and I've, made a lot of great friends and had a lot of good experiences at conferences and things like that, where I know there are people out there who hang out a shingle and put a basket of balls in the trunk of their car and never take the next step in certification or education.
And being good at tennis does not necessarily make you a good coach. There's certainly a didactic element to that means that if you're seeking coaching, a player would do well to seek someone who is not just a good tennis player, but has worked on these certifications. Wouldn't you agree?
Without a doubt. And I mean, it's like I said, it's a battle and an argument I'm always willing to have, and have certainly been having for most of my career. And yes, I completely agree with that. I've been much more successful as a coach than I ever was as a player. And I think that one is not necessary to be the other. There are incredible examples within other sports, basketball and football, notably, where some of the best coaches were never successful as players, but they understand the game, I think, in a different way.
It is a different thing. So with your coaching, tell me what age groups and skill levels are you working with?
Oh, I think, you got to be willing to work with all of them. I have students that are 3 and I have students that are competitive in their 80s. That is something that, and tennis is fortunate to have that sort of range. It's one of the few sports that you can play all the way into your 80s, and it's a sport of a lifetime is one of their USTA's major hashtags. They love the hashtag everything sport of a lifetime. And so, I mean, my favorite age, most of my career, I've been working with juniors a lot. My favorite age is like right in 7 to 10, where they're, sort of savvy enough and they can follow directions. They can understand the elements you're trying to coach. But that's where they have the most fun. And I mean, you go from being just a athlete to a player in that window really, really easily. I love that age group.
I'm kind of curious too. It is a lifetime sport, and that's one great thing about tennis, right? I quit playing a long time ago, but it's one of those sports that you can play at any time. It's also just a fun game. I think that's something people forget about tennis is it's something you can play at any age, and it's just a lot of fun to play tennis. Um, but given that, so do you also do a lot of coaching of people? And since we're fit after 40 in the 40 plus range, and are there people that are coming to the sport now that maybe hadn't played when they were younger? Are you introducing people to the sport still at older ages, or are you mainly coaching people in the older age brackets that have been playing tennis their whole lives?
No, certainly. I think that's one of the wonderful things about certainly the club environment where I think I thrive the most. I've done corporate clubs, I've done independent coaching, and now at a country club. I think the country club environment really lends itself to that. There's a lot of people that come to tennis in their 30s, in their 40s, and want to pick up the game because they see that it's a competitive outlet. It's a social, there's a social aspect to it. It's incredible, sort of the friends you can make and the community you build. And that element is something you don't see in, the kickball leagues and softball and all these other sort of different
Yeah.
sports that don't treat it that way.
And you're down in Georgia too, which I think is kind of an interesting place to be as far as tennis goes. I grew up and I went to high school at least in the Atlanta area, and of course, as a younger person, I was when I was really young, I took tennis lessons back in Hendersonville, Tennessee, where there was a little bit of a tennis culture there. Uh, but when I got to Atlanta specifically, and I know you're in Augusta now, like that is a town that is definitely a tennis town. I don't think people realize that so much, but at least it used to be. I don't know if this is the case, but when I was there, the thing everyone played Alta, Atlanta Lawn Tennis Association. Like people played league tennis, and they started when they were kids. I was a high schooler, so when I wasn't playing high school tennis, I was playing Alta seasons the whole time, and it's really kind of Georgia's kind of a state that fosters that sport to some degree, I think. Do you still feel that? Is that the case down where you are? Is there a culture of tennis really in that state still?
Without a doubt. I mean, I think Florida has the medal for the most, sort of the most tennis participation. But Georgia is a close second, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Atlanta is still absolutely thriving. I was there for 7 years before we very recently moved to Augusta. Alta still claims, I think, 75,000 members. And
Wow.
so of the 75,000 members, they do, at any given time, I think probably 40,000 of them are probably playing in some sort of capacity in each season. So it's pretty
Amazing.
incredible, that to have those kinds of numbers and that kind of support for the sport and the industry. And that's why coaches thrive there too. But it's also, it's oversaturated in some ways, and
Hmm.
there are different things that thrive in Atlanta as far as competitive tennis that I don't think necessarily lends itself to the fun side of it. I think people are intimidated, and it's hard to break into the game at an older age when all you see is the competitive side. And I think
Yeah.
some of that in Atlanta, I sort of butted up against that and really had to steer people in a way that they can see the fun first and then go compete and join a team and all that stuff that really intimidates people.
Yeah. No, that's a good point.
As we dig into kind of your approach to training, my first question, of course, you're teaching a broad variety of athletes, not just at age groups, but probably in their goals, right? You've got people that just want to have a good time. You've got people that just want to stay fit, and you've got people that want to be competitive. So, can you kind of speak to the differences between those goals before we dig into the training regimen itself?
Yeah, certainly. I mean that, and it's something that I love to bring up. I mean, we want people playing tennis, you know, different ways and basically as much as possible. I mean, from a coaching standpoint, I want all my students on the court 3 times a week, and one of them should be instructional, one of them should be competitive, and one should be for fun. You know, and finding those windows, finding those groups of players, you know, just like-minded groups, like, you know, like levels and things like that, does change the game dramatically. And for people that go out and play one match a week and lose, and then get up the next Saturday morning and go out and play another match, that's a hard transition, versus if you have these multiple outlets. So I think the fun side is where you see programs like cardio tennis, drill programs, usually with a cost associated with it. But, you know, there's that social aspect of just social play, just a foursome that gets together on a prescribed day. Private lessons are invaluable, not just because I'm a professional coach, but
Right.
because you have to add that element of your game. You have to be improving. There's always technical things that are going to go wrong that need to be improved. And then competitive is how you really, I think, get enthusiasm for the game. You can't be enthusiastic about just going to the classroom and learning and doing, you know, improving yourself that way. I think competing is where you see people really fall in love, and the people that are the most enthusiastic are the ones that are competing on a regular basis also.
Man, nothing beats that dopamine rush of winning a match, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. A little bit of risk, a little bit of fight or flight, and you figure it out. You're right.
That's right.
And one of the great things about tennis too, I think, is we do have a lot of trainers on here. We talk about lifting weights and running and cycling, and like Chris said, like it's nice to have somebody that actually coaches a sport here versus, you know, basically people that are good at exercising. And I mean,
That's right.
I would argue ultra running is a sport, but it's not. It doesn't have the same instant fun that a racket sport has. Like, you know, a lot of what we talk about here is the fact that if you're going to have a fitness program of some kind, it has to be something you actually enjoy doing. And sometimes it's harder, I think, for people to say, I actually enjoy going out and running 20 miles, or I actually enjoy going out and riding a bicycle for 30 or 40 or 50 miles. I think it's hard for them to say that. Now, when you're going out and playing tennis, though, tennis is an athletic activity, but there's strategy involved, there's skill involved, and you're playing a game. It's like the same as if you're playing a board game. You get that same kind of fun from it. Do you find that that's something that really draws people, and does that keep people, I guess, more connected to the sport? Whereas, like, you know, they might try running and be like, man, this sucks, I'm out of here. Like tennis, like there's a way to, like, once you develop some of those basic skills, you can have fun right away.
And it's social. It's social.
Social.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's no doubt about it. I think that there's evidence, you know, and USTA loves to talk about the life expectancy of a tennis player is actually 9.2 years longer than average, right?
Wow.
And so it
Right.
is unbelievable. And there's other I love stats like that, because if
Right.
you've got time to play tennis 3 days a week, you're clearly living a better life than the average person anyway.
Right.
But
Yeah.
there are there are certain things about that, where they talk about the mobility, you talk about problem solving, and even the cognitive, just court awareness. I mean, just being able to move around the court, and like you said, Tony, I mean, devising strategies and changing strategies to beat different players. A lot of that goes right into the health benefits of tennis, and so we don't just talk about the exercise part of it or the strength side of it. We absolutely, you know, make note of the cognitive side of figuring it out as you go.
Yeah, that's right. Back to that statistic, that just kind of a funny side note. Rich Roll has a thing where he always talks about, he loves to put out the statistic. He's like, people that do triathlons tend to be more financially successful than other people. And it's like,
Right.
yeah, that's definitely, people that do triathlons are financially successful, therefore they can afford to do triathlons.
That's right. That's
So,
right.
yeah,
You want an $8,000 bike? An $8,000 bike doesn't make you richer. It's the bottleneck is elsewhere.
That's true. Well, good. I'm glad that those parts of the statistics don't go unnoticed, at least by you guys.
So what does a typical training regimen look like? You said that you like 3 days a week. How do you split that up, and how does it differ from a novice versus a more sophisticated player?
Right. Well, so on the novice side, they need more repetition. They can't, the fun of tennis. I mean, like I was saying before, the fun of it is in competition. Sometimes it is in rally and game-based skills, which the novice, it does take time to develop. So, and from a coaching side, you have to create sort of intent among, within the lesson, so that whatever skill you're working on, it's not just make contact with the ball. It's make contact with the ball and make it go over here.
Right.
It's target based. There's hitting windows. There's all these things that we can measure to make it fun. It's how many out of 10. It's what can you, and there's all these different ways to create that competitiveness within the player, even before they can actually serve, rally, and score and play the game. So that's very important for the novice, that they don't just feel like they're taking tennis. They have to feel like they're playing tennis. And I mean, we talk about that with our juniors all the time. It's not like a piano lesson. You don't just go and take piano. You are a tennis player. You want to play the game. And so we find ways to do that. For the advanced player, it's much more about pattern recognition. It's about, anticipation, mobility. It, sort of actually comes in much later in the game. The first couple of things that we coach are eye-hand coordination. It's perception. Can you put the racket on the ball? And so once you have that, then you add direction, then you add mobility. Can I get to the next ball after this? The things like that. So it is very much it's very much a ladder. You have to go one rung at a time, and you find ways to make it fun along the way.
So it sounds like with novice players, you're coaching a lot more of the physical aspects, and with advanced players, it's a lot more the head game. It's a lot more seeing and knowing how to react. It's a knowledge based coaching at that point. Am I close on that?
Definitely, absolutely right. I mean, you can, we take tennis apart in a lot of ways where it's very common for a less skilled player to defeat a more skilled player because they can outthink them. And it's just such a common sentiment among our students when they come off the court and just say, oh my God, I can't believe I lost to that person. I'm better than them. Well, not today you weren't, and there's a lot of that part too, where we love that. I mean, that's part of the game that I absolutely love. And it's also fun for me as a 40 something to be able to defeat, younger players who are much better than me technically or physically, but I'm way smarter and understand the game way better. And so those are parts of it that make it fun for me too, that I can still engage competitively with players like that.
I was just thinking also when we were talking about tennis, as far as when we're talking about the older folks playing tennis too, since we're talking about older folks to some degree here, something that I wonder if you've noticed too much is functional movement. Like tennis seems to be a great sport for like working on a lot of these functional movement type things that we talk quite a bit about on here. So I didn't want to change topic too much from what Chris was getting at, but I was just thinking, you've got short stops and starts and you're moving quickly. You're talking about hand-eye coordination, quick reactions, reflexes, movements that we don't do on a day-to-day basis. We had one guest one time come on here and said, go do a somersault sometime. Try doing a somersault, things you do for a kid.
Right.
And I went out and tried a somersault and I was like, oh yeah, that makes me real dizzy. That's crazy. I haven't done that forever. And I consider myself to be reasonably athletic. But tennis is like that too. You get a lot of those movements in that we don't find ourselves doing in our 40s or 30s, even 30s, 40s, 50s. We don't find ourselves doing the types of movements. Do you see a lot of advancement from people, that maybe come in lacking a lot of this mobility, gaining it from playing tennis?
I would say that gaining it from playing tennis is a difficult way to put it. I think that you have to do that on the side, but we don't get that on the court during the game. But functional movement, you're right. I mean, we deal with big joints. I need, you got to be able to control hip and shoulder movements. You've got to be able to control, core rotations. And these are big movements that you're right, we don't do on a daily basis. And so some of the stuff that we recommend to players to train are, it's a Pilates style exercise. It's got to be dynamic. It's got to open up larger movements. But I think that's also why tennis players struggle so much. So you have to take them right up to a point where they get into that struggle zone. You get out of your comfort zone into that next little phase of, man, I really can't make my body do this. And then you send them off the court going, all right, well, you got 50 side lunges and you got to do some arm circles and you got to do some, you got to open your shoulders more and you have to add all these different elements off the court so that when you come back on the court next week, maybe you're going to be a little better at that, and we'll build it from there.
That's kind of you're giving them something that gives they want to be better at tennis. So then you've got a motivation to do these things on the side. It's like, hey, I don't like doing this strength training. I don't like doing this stretching yoga type stuff. But if I do that, I might be a better tennis player. So I think that's great.
Motivation. So what other drills and exercises do you have your players doing to improve the movement, the range of motion, the strength, that kind of thing? What's happening outside of playing tennis to improve the game?
Yeah, I think, some of the stuff, just the footwork that's necessary. We talk a lot about, skipping. It's like Tony said with doing a somersault. Like, you would be absolutely floored at the number of 40-year-olds that don't know how to skip. Or, I mean, it's you get them out there and say skip from here to there, and it's ugly, it's disjointed, it's asymmetrical. There's and so things like that, skipping, backpedaling, side shuffling, even doing like crossover steps. When you talk about like a karaoke step as part of a footwork warm up, we put that into every lesson. Everything we do with juniors always includes a footwork element and a dynamic warm up element where we throw all that stuff out there. Because there are practical reasons for it. And there are, it's like, if you're going to do crossover steps, here's where we're going to use it during tennis, or if you're doing a side lunge, here's where we're going to use it during tennis. Mm-hmm. So a lot of that stuff, the footwork is incredibly important. And especially for the older players, it's important just for confidence, because it's, if you're tiptoeing around and you're scared to fall down, you're going to have trouble playing tennis. You've got to be able to react to the ball and know that your body's going to do what you want it to.
That's where placement becomes very important. If you know where to place
Indeed.
The ball.
Indeed.
And if I recall, you were very, very good at that. So let's say that I, guy like me, I haven't touched a tennis racket in well over a decade. And let's say that I start taking classes. How long? When do I start seeing improvement? When do I start feeling more confident and start to be able to place the ball, to catch the ball, to know mm-hmm. where the contact point is, all that stuff?
If you're with the right coach, the answer is within 60 minutes. If the coaching methodology has really changed in the last 20 years to include these dramatic regressions and progressions of a particular skill. So if you're having trouble placing the ball, then we take the racket out of your hand and we say, look, let's do a big ball toss using your core, catch it with two hands on this side of your body, throw it with two hands to that area of the court, and you can regress any skill you want from a full speed 80-foot window where I'm feeding the ball literally from 80 feet away, all the way down to put the racket down, catch this kickball with both hands, and things like that allow us to show improvement immediately. And that's what people want. People do not want to leave discouraged. They don't want to leave with the pro going, it'll be better next week. Don't worry. Sorry, you didn't make contact this week, And a lot of coaches used to teach like that. They would never be any closer than 60 feet away from their student, and they're feeding balls saying, try again. And it's, and we don't do that anymore. We are very engaged. We can regress any particular skill all the way down to success. And that's what people want. They want to feel successful. They want to know that there's a next step all the time.
And what's the hardest thing as a beginner? What's the hardest thing to get? What do you see frustrating new players the most?
Ooh, timing. I mean, people just panic. They see the ball in the air and absolutely freak out. We talk about transit time. So like normal transit time for the ball would be about 2 seconds from my racket to your racket. In 2 seconds, you can accomplish an unbelievable amount of decision-making and action taking, so what we see people doing is they'll race toward the ball and meet it right where it bounces the first time, not realizing like you've got the bounce plus the rise plus the fall, mm-hmm. Like the point doesn't end until the second bounce, and getting people used to that idea and just taking the time that they've got is definitely the hardest thing for beginners. I mean, they just absolutely crash into the ball at full speed. And it's one of those, like, you've got to judge it, and then you've got to meet it somewhere out there in space. And hopefully by the time you meet the ball, you get there first and you stop and you set up and you do all these things that sort of take patience and take, good anticipation. But if you're crashing into the ball full speed, the chances of you hitting it are low. And then the chances of it doing what you want are even lower.
Right. So
Yeah.
how do you coach people through that? What do you use to try to educate people on that discipline?
Well, honestly, it's modified equipment. That's another thing that has become more widely accepted in the last 20 years is, the low compression balls, smaller spaces, being able to shrink the game down so that it's not just one size fits all, literally. And even with adults, we have now started doing all of my 101 students. We start with a low compression ball that's designed for, basically like a 7 to 10-year-old kid, as far as the height that it bounces, the amount of pressure, the way that it flies off the racket. And so with modified equipment, you can slow it down. And then, speed, it's good technique is scalable. So once you have good technique at this speed, speeding it up is then way easier, but if you try to develop it at a certain speed that's beyond their capability, it won't happen. And then they get really discouraged.
And for those who don't know, a lower pressure ball is going to travel more slowly so that you can practice technique and just catch up with it.
Exactly. Yeah, you got it.
Is that correct?
It's just softer, softer, squishier. You got it.
When I was playing racquetball, we would practice. I think the red balls were the slower ones, and the blue or the purple were faster. So we would practice drills with the red ones, and then go up to the faster ones as time went
exactly
on.
Right. And that happened. It happened in racquetball even later than tennis. I mean, the development of what we call it's the Roji system. It's red, orange, green, yellow. So yellow is a full compression ball all the way down to a red ball, which is about 30% of the pressure, and it's actually larger than a tennis ball. We use those for true beginners and younger kids. And then each phase has a space. You change space, so the court gets bigger and the ball gets bouncier with each step.
The other thing that I struggled with was how far to reach, because you're rushing to catch a ball and you forget that you've got X number of feet, including your arm and the racket. And if you want a full swing, you need to stop before you're right on top of it. That was another thing that you've got to you got to drill. You just got to do it.
Yeah.
Very true. Very true. Anybody, and that's why we always ask, what other sports have you played? Because invariably, if they've played basketball, if they've played volleyball, if they've played any sport where you touch the ball, they are going to mess up the spacing of a racket sport.
Right.
That's just comes with the territory. Yeah.
You just kind of have to get to where you recognize the end of that racket as the end of your reach versus your hand as the end of your reach. I think it becomes an extension of you. I know and it's been so long since I've really honestly paid attention to tennis. Sadly, it used to be kind of the thing that defined me as a person, I think, but I have subsequently found new things to define myself as a person and all. But I remember a lot of talk a while back that the sport was getting too fast. Is that still a topic in tennis? Like the sport's actually getting too fast?
I remember when that was a problem, and it has caught up. I think that is no longer a problem. It is incredibly fast. It's a reflection of, I think, the equipment more than anything. Racket and string technology has really gone crazy in the last 30 years, and that has affected strategy. And so you see, like, even in professional doubles for a while, people stopped coming to the net. I mean, well, singles, certainly people have stopped coming to the net because the ball is now traveling a lot faster. It's really a daunting task to go walking into the line of fire when your opponent can hit his forehand 110 miles an hour.
Wow.
Jannik Sinner right now is he's one of the top players in the world and sort of the up and comer in this new generation. He had a point in the US Open last year. He hit 3 balls over 100 miles an hour in 1 point. And it's like,
wow,
it's unreal to think about that and to process that. And then imagine playing doubles and that return of serve, the serve goes that way at 130 and now it's coming back to you at 110 and you're standing there at the net. Like, good luck volleying that ball. And so for our students, we always mention that and we talk about that in terms of, how good are these people to be able to do it. But I think that, On the professional side, it definitely caught up. I mean, it's something that people just deal with now. You hardly ever hear anybody say it. And the people got faster. They changed their techniques and changed their positioning to deal with it. From the club side, our players are not having that problem. The equipment improvements have dramatically helped club players, but have not led to, overpowering opponents or sort of, I would say, any like increased danger of that.
And a club player who jumps in front of a 130-mile-an-hour ball, that ball is actually just going to pass through their body
oh man,
into the fence, right? I don't see anybody returning that.
It is pretty unbelievable to imagine that thing coming at you that fast.
Whoa.
Yeah.
God. So you said when you're coaching a new player that they're going to see improvement on day one. They're going to see improvement after an hour of concentrated coaching. And so let's say I'm doing 3 days a week. I'm doing my drills. I'm doing everything that I should. How soon would you put me in a competition?
Oh, I love it. So yeah, that's as soon as you are confident that you can serve, rally, and score. That's kind of our measurement, right? The serve is, again, a very intimidating shot to learn. There are ways around it. I mean, we have kind of, yes, underhand serves are legal, and we can talk someone through it in that way. But if you can confidently hit an overhand serve that will go in half the time, if you can put the racket on the ball on your forehand and backhand side, and if you know the scoring, then you're ready. And I mean, I think that's, as long as you're playing with a similar level and a similar, mindset of person, then you can have fun. The problem is, and this is where, in Atlanta, I saw a lot of this, and certainly in juniors, we see a lot of this. When people compete too soon, they will fall out of love with the game really fast. Juniors especially. And I mean, USTA has stats on this, on the number of kids who play one tournament. And it's bad. I mean, the numbers are really bad with one and done. And it really is just a function of they weren't ready. And going out there and doing something like tennis, where it is a very, it can be a very solitary sport. You're on the court by yourself, and you've got to be able to work your way through conflicts, arguments, disagreements with the opponent, confidently calling the ball. There's no referee. You're calling your own ball, even as young as 7, 8 years old. I mean, that stuff is difficult. And so there are pieces that we really focus on to make sure that kids are ready and can confidently do that. And then on the adult side, it's much more about don't start a fight. Like, adults tend to be overconfident when they go out there. They would love to start a fight, and they memorize one rule from the rule book, and they're going to go out there and make sure they know it.
That's right.
But I mean, that, the etiquette side of it, and sort of how the match is designed to flow, and who's in charge of what. And I mean, that kind of stuff is more important with the adults. From the kids' angle, it is just confidence. Like, they won't speak up. They don't want to argue with each other. They always look to the sidelines. And so our sport is unique like that. I mean, my 4-year-old joined a soccer team, and having only kicked the ball in the front yard with me, walked out on a Saturday and did a 30-minute practice and played a soccer game that day. Nice. And tennis just isn't like that. And that's just not something that I don't think it needs to be like that. I don't think it's not a goal that we're after, but we also understand that the first competitive opportunity should be a good one. Even if it's a loss, it should feel like they know what they're doing. And I think confusion is an absolute killer when it comes to stuff like that.
So you've talked about confusion, and you've talked about how advanced players, what you're trying to teach an advanced player has a lot more to do with strategy. So let's talk a little bit about mental strategies here, because once I can hit the ball, once I can serve, once I can hit the ball, from there it's the game is in my head, right? Mm-hmm. How do you coach this?
Yeah, that's I will preface that by saying I consider myself a developmental coach, and there is a significant difference between developmental coaching and high performance or competitive coaching. I prefer the developmental side, even though I have been in my 25 years ago very successful competitively. But I think we coach that tennis is a game of winning the right points, not winning all the points. There's a great Roger Federer clip that's out there, and he's speaking at a graduation ceremony, and he talks about what we, and it's a rule that we call the 55, 65, 75 rule. you only have to win 55% of the points, and you're going to win 65% of your games, and you're going to win 75% of your matches. But if you think that you have to win 75% of the points, you're going to miss more often. You're going to take unnecessary risk. You're going to play the game differently. And not only that, you're going to get really angry when you lose one.
Right.
And so that's part of the mental side of it, is dealing with, I lost that point, but I'm not going to lose the next one because of it, And so we let things go faster. We have to be able to sort of let it roll off your back and move on. And you have to figure out each score has its own personality. And so at 30 all, can I afford to give away a point? Probably not the same way I could if it was 30 love, so I play differently in that situation. And so that's where the chess match really starts, is how do I play the opponent? How do I play the score? And what do I really need for to be successful in the overall match? Which is why tennis is such a cool game, because it takes a long time to complete a match. That's why we have points, games, sets, and matches, because along the way, you don't have to win all of them. You just have to be the winner at the end.
Yeah.
Maybe this is a good time to go through some of the basic scoring game and match rules, because a lot of people may not know. They hear 15 love, 30 love. They don't necessarily know what that means. I mean, love means 0, but how is tennis scored, and how many matches to a game?
So
game, set, match, pro sets, versus regular sets, all that good stuff.
Oh my gosh, there are a lot of ways.
Right.
So in general, right? So tennis is each game is a 4-point system. So we have love is 0, and then we have 15, 30, 40 game. And so in order to win a game, you have to win 4 points in a row, or you have to win by 2. So if you end up at 40 all, then you then have to win the game by 2 points. That's another aspect of tennis that we often talk about competitively, is that you cannot alternate points. You will eventually have to win 2 in a row. And the person who wins any game will have won 2 points in a row at some point. So that's, again, a strategic aspect that we definitely talk about. Then if you do that, if you sort of complete the game, then each game is then tallied and it goes towards a set. So a set is usually the first person to win 6 games. There's also mini sets where some of our juniors play what's called a short set, a 4-game set, with similar rules, right? So you get up to 4, you are automatically the winner. When you're playing to 6, you typically play 2 out of 3 sets. So then you have to win, your first set score might be 6-4 and you beat the opponent. Then the opponent wins the second set, 6-3. And so then you have to play a third set. And then you would, the winner of the third one would then be the winner of the match. There's also a very complicated tiebreaker system where if we end up at 6 games all, we have to play a special game called a tiebreaker. Tiebreakers are confusing and rightfully so. The design of the tiebreaker is that it's supposed to nullify the advantage of serving. So, most people's serves are offensive shots. It's a weapon. Right. So we don't ever let someone serve a whole game as a tiebreaker. You have to alternate every 2 points. I serve 2, then you serve 2, and then I serve 2, and then you serve 2. And it nullifies some of that advantage of the server. And then, it's, again, as complicated as you can imagine. It's how far down this rabbit hole do we need to go?
Right. So suffice it to say, it's a pretty complex game. It looks simple. Whoever doesn't return the next hit loses the point. Well, okay, there's a lot more to it than that. So
right, exactly right. And so it gives you that opportunity to get over your mistakes faster. And I mean, famously, I hate to mention him twice, but Yannick Sinner was also a very good skier, a competitive skier when he was a kid, and he chose tennis because he says that in skiing, one mistake and you're out of the competition. Like you can't win if you fall down once on a ski run. Yeah. But in tennis, you can make hundreds of mistakes and still win a match. And so that's sort of famously is a great way to think about it. Like you do not have to be perfect to win. You just need to be good at the right times.
And I think that, the whole scoring system seems complicated, but it does do a really good job of nullifying disadvantages. Also, I don't know if you mentioned it, but of course you always switch sides in
Hmm.
tennis too. And in the tiebreaker, after those two serves on one side, you're going to switch sides and keep on doing that. Because, the sun might be shining one way or the
Right.
wind might be blowing a different way. We always want to try to take within tennis and make sure we nullify any disadvantage the other person might have by all these different kind of complexities, but those complexities exist for a pretty good reason.
Definitely.
Well
Yeah,
thought
it is.
out.
It's hard. Yeah, exactly right. It's hard to explain it and hard to figure it out. But if you're the person with the sun in your eyes, you're like, you can't wait to
Yeah,
switch
Yeah,
sides. You're not
that's
going to
right.
forget that it's time to switch sides. Yeah.
So what drills do you use for specifically reflexes and hand-eye coordination? How do you train that if you're dealing with someone who's just flat out unathletic, or do you switch them to pickleball at that point?
Oh, yeah. See, well, I mean, there's room for that. If if they're having trouble making contact with a tennis ball, there's always pickleball. Um, but like for hand-eye stuff, it's a lot of tossing and catching. It's juggling and two ball drills where you have to manage, one ball in the air, one ball in your hand. Lots of just sort of opening and closing of your eyes, turning around and sort of picking up the ball in space. So we do a lot of those kinds of things. A lot of that stuff is essentially playing catch, and most of tennis is just a modified version of catch. I'm going to send you the ball, you're going to send it back to me. And so when we do hand-eye coordination, even at the lowest levels, it's a lot of just sending and receiving skills. Can you put your hand where that ball is going to be? Or even when we roll it, can you put your foot in the path of that ball and know where it's going to be at any given time? And those are just the foundational elements. Then we add the racket. Now it's this much farther away from you. Can you put the racket on the ball in space? And so a lot of the eye hand stuff starts like that. It starts with just tossing and catching, and if you can do that, then we can progress from there.
Nice. So obviously the show is focused on health and wellness, and the best exercise is the one you'll do. And tennis is fun. If you enjoy it, you're going to stick with it, and that's fantastic. But let's dig into the health benefits a little bit. So just on the surface, what health benefits do you see for your players? How does their health and fitness improve as they play?
Oh man, I mean, the obvious ones are cardiovascular fitness. Tennis is still a cardio sport and a cardio activity, even though it is a lot of ups and downs. It is not a constant 60 or 65% heart rate where you just go cruising along. Tennis is 10 seconds on and 20 seconds off, 10 seconds on, 20 seconds off. And it is a lot of interval training like that. But at the same time, it's, you have to be able to control what your body does in between, the recovery times, your breathing exercises, things like that, which also go right to cardiovascular fitness. So that stuff seems the very obvious side of it. And Tony brought up dopamine earlier, or I think Chris, maybe you did.
Yeah.
The aspect of winning and losing, the competitive side, the endorphins you get from exercise, but also the pressure of competition. So you get adrenaline, you get endorphins, the cortisol of stress, your stress hormones and your fight or flight response, and those are also sort of healthy things to manage, and you want your body to feel those things from time to time, and so that's all of those responses too. Make you behave in different ways and sort of give your body the chance to react like it doesn't get to day to day. It just puts you in a very specific mindset and a very specific environment.
And how do you contrast tennis with other cardio sports? How does it compare?
Well, I think I mean, to what I was saying, it's a lot of ups and downs. But the nice thing about tennis, and this is again goes to the scoring, a normal tennis match, if you're going to go out and actually play a competitive match, you're going to be out there for 90 to 120 minutes. There's no such thing as going out for a quick 30-minute tennis match. That doesn't exist. And so from a coaching side of it, like our cardio tennis classes, when we train coaches on how to deliver cardio tennis is a strict 60-minute time limit with very specific, it's kind of like, it's a fitness class using tennis skills. And so we have specific elements that we have to incorporate, and we move through it very quickly, and we can, knock out a pretty incredible workout in 60 minutes. But if you're going to go out there and play a match, you have to manage yourself, the energy level and the amount of, your efficiency. You got to manage how much energy you expend on each point, and sort of how are you going to make it for 2 hours. I will say, since I know that both of you are into other endurance sports, cycling and running and things like that, the longest tennis match in competitive history is over 11 hours. And that,
wow, it's been some long ones.
So and I'm glad I remembered to bring it up. So the longest tennis match, it happened at Wimbledon, like in 2010. And it happened over 3 days. It took these guys 11 hours of actual play time over 3 days of playing to decide this match. And so there are extremes where tennis can also be an endurance sport, I suppose.
Wow.
Well, and there's a lot of instances too that people don't think about. I think with tennis, is the element of weather in it too. There's a lot of these long matches have taken place in 100-degree plus weather too.
Lord.
So it has endurance elements people don't even begin to think about it. The matches can take theoretically as long as there's no theoretical end to a tennis match, because you can, as we've talked about, the scoring goes on and on and on and on. And weather conditions exist, and all the things that we may be in face in other endurance sports exist in tennis.
Yeah, there's a famous quote from Andre Agassi, who said exactly that. He said, there is, you never run out of time in tennis. There is no clock, and so if you can figure it out, and if you can keep the match going, you always have a chance to win. And there's never a time when anybody is completely outmatched and then just waiting for the clock to run out.
Right.
You have a chance to win every match that you are ever in until match point happens.
Yeah.
So if instead of ultra running, you want to do sprint intervals for 11 hours, tennis is the game for you. That's right.
Oh man,
there you go.
No, you won't catch me doing that for 11 hours.
So what about the other health benefits? Cardiovascular is the obvious one, but what else do you see? Stress relief, flexibility, mobility. What else do you see in your players?
Yeah, certainly those. I mean, the stress relief, just that release and being able to get out there and sort of find get around other players is always good. The social side of it is incredible. Yeah. For flexibility, now I'm gonna call out the greater tennis community in general. We are not stretchers. I don't have a whole lot of students that show up to their lessons and say, "Hey, coach, do you mind if I stretch for 5 minutes before we start?" And I mean, it's and from the fitness side of it, like I was previously have been certified for TRX, and I've done a lot of sort of fitness activities for myself to keep myself healthy. But I will freely admit that tennis players are very bad at recovery exercises, whether it be foam rolling, stretching. It is like pulling teeth to get my students to do any of that stuff, even though I will sing its praises and I will tell them every day what they need. It's, they'll walk off the court and get right in the car and off to home, and then creak as they get out of the car and wonder why,
Runners, for the record, that is not limited to that's runners, cyclists. I think that describes people, really, people in general. Or nobody
it's bad
does
when you're married to a yoga instructor too. So,
oh yeah. But I also say, like, I use an inversion table and swear by it. So I mean, that's another one where it's sort of I can't do a lot of those flexibility exercises myself. I'm not terribly flexible. I can still touch my toes and do some normal stretching, but the inversion table is absolutely invaluable for me too. I do a lot of recovery on the inversion table.
That's cool. So let's talk about cross training. We talked about stretching that people don't do, but maybe should. Maybe there's a yoga instructor somewhere who could walk us through that. But is strength training part of your program? What else do you recommend in terms of cross training for your athletes?
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's I would say strength is not always an essential piece of it. A lot of balance exercises are very, very good. We do resistance bands, which is kind of certainly easier for my clientele to handle than weights. But I mean, just even something as simple as 1 foot pistol squats and things like that, where you're forced to balance, you're forced to maintain control over your knees and ankles and things like that, I think help immensely. We still see a lot of knee injuries in tennis. We see a lot of ankles and frankly in pickleball, shin splints has now become one of the biggest injuries in pickleball. And it has to do with the technique of standing up close to the net and leaning forward and all these things that pickleball players' bodies aren't used to doing, moving in general.
Right. Yeah.
So some of that stuff I think is much more about, again, it's confidence. You have to be able to take that first step and know that you're not going to break your leg, and so right. The cross training exercises and the stuff that we really recommend is stuff that isn't going to push them beyond their comfort zone, because we know they won't do it, but stuff that you can sit in your living room and use a resistance band, or
sure.
stand on one foot for 10 seconds and stabilize your knee and see if you can, without wobbling, can you stand still on one leg, and stuff like that, I think does make a big difference. But yeah, I wish I could say that I had, sort of students that faithfully execute all of the all the stuff I tell them to do.
Well,
but it is tough. Yeah. So you make it simple and you say, hey, look, when you're off court, you can do juggling exercises, you can do dynamic stretching, you can do some resistance bands, and that's usually as far as I'll take it, to make sure that they actually have something to do at home.
We usually consider running shin splints to be kind of a beginner injury. Like that's always the first injury people get, it seems like. So it kind of makes sense if you're really starting a sport. It seems like that's the first thing to go.
Interesting. Yeah. I'm sure that that's true. I mean, it really is. It's like that, the activation of those muscles and using, sort of using parts of your body that are not used to it,
What about running or swimming? Do you have your athletes doing any of that stuff?
For the cardio and element and for the endurance side, yes. But really, and it's just a funny one, like swimming more so, I think, because it does develop more core strength. And then of course, shoulder mobility is huge for tennis, and you can certainly develop shoulder mobility in tennis or in swimming, and a lot of those same movements. So, I mean, that I think, I recommend more, but it's just access too. I mean, not everybody has access year round or even in short seasonal ways to, lap pools and stuff like that, where they can actually do it. And again, it's to Tony's point from earlier, those are solitary sports, and it's hard to tell somebody, I need you to go to the swimming, to the pool for 45 minutes and swim laps, and it's, I think that people that enjoy tennis probably don't enjoy those sports as much because of that, that they want that social aspect,
What about running suicides? I mean, I remember when I was a tennis player, that was a popular punishment for us when we did something stupid.
Right.
Ooh, thank you for bringing that up, Tony. So modern coaching methodology, right? So we say we never give exercise as punishment, especially to children. Exercise as punishment, then you get this negative association and all these other things. So I mean, exercise is a reward more than anything, but suicides, short bursts, changing direction. We have sort of general measurement tools that we do for a lot of our students. That there's the spider drill, which is 5 directions I wish it was 8 because it would make more sense, but it's 5 directions, out and back in quick bursts, things like that, side to side movements that you don't get in running, that we do a lot of in tennis. Stuff like that is, you're absolutely right. We train those starting and stopping movements more than just straight line, endurance.
Yeah. So we've touched on a little bit of the common injuries in tennis, but let's talk about injury prevention. Obviously, that's, if you hire a coach, the number one goal is to get you to your match uninjured, right? I mean,
Without a doubt. We make that joke all the time. I mean, I can't make any money off you if you're injured, so I want you on the court. I want you in the lessons. I want you participating as much as possible for my own livelihood and for your own enjoyment. The injury side of it, it's very real. We always talk about good technique prevents injury. So that is our number one goal when we really start into private lessons for somebody that wants to compete or that is interested in playing 3 times a week. Virtually all tennis elbow style injuries are
Right.
repetitive use injuries. We
Yep.
have acute injuries like a twisted ankle or an
Sure.
ACL or things like that happen in a blink. But tennis elbow is twisting and snapping of the wrist and elbow under impact. And so if you're twisting your forearm because you really want the ball to go over there, but you're not pointing there, and so at the last second you decide, let me just flick my wrist, that is where tennis elbow comes from. And so good technique, sort of can address that. It's very hard to recover after you injure yourself because it's repetitive use. I mean, people say, can I play this week? It's like, you can't play for 3 weeks. You got to really rest that and then come back, and we're gonna try to change what it is that you're doing that caused it. But I think that's my bread and butter is, I can be a very technical coach, and it's always in relation to injury prevention. We do it this way because of that. And I think it's fun and it's not bragging to be able to say, I have spent the last 15 years playing tennis, 40 plus hours a week and have never had tennis elbow. So, I mean, there is a certain amount of pride I take in that. And I definitely tell my students that when they see me swing a tennis racket, make it look like this, and it will help just the fluidity, the smoothness. You don't want jerky and abrupt movements in any of those small joints. The wrist and elbow cannot take those abrupt movements under impact. And a tennis racket is too heavy, and a tennis ball is too heavy. And that's why I think pickleball is also more conducive to that. You don't see, there are no elbows and elbow injuries in pickleball. You see some wrist injuries from people snapping their wrist too much, but the pickleball paddle is 8 ounces compared to 10 or 11 for a tennis racket. The pickleball itself is much lighter. So there's all those aspects too that that make that an easier one.
And if we had a hypothetical, I guess probably a theoretical tennis player who did warm up and cool down, there are stretches that you can do to help reduce the risk of tennis elbow. Could you walk us through a couple of those?
Definitely. A good over your head tricep stretch is always good to loosen the elbow. You've got to open the shoulders. I love the door jam stretch where you grab the door and twist against it. Doing just pulling the hand back to stretch the forearm muscles. You pull your hand back and then flex it forward. Are obvious ones. Even twisting movements. When you're doing them controlled, you can build strength in your forearm muscles by twisting slower and without the impact of the ball. And then, of course, just squeezing movements. If you've got a stress ball or one of those, the spring-loaded grip, the grip strength tools, those things actually help dramatically also to build the forearm muscles and the tendons and the. Hey, there it is. Nice, got one on your desk. All right.
Yeah.
So yes, I think stuff like that.
Yeah. For those who can't see, I have a grip thing of a desk, a grip exercise thing.
Love it. Well, good. Then you know what I'm talking about. So yeah, stuff like that are sort of the easy ones. And then the next phase of that is then now you got to do it with the ball and the racket in your hand. And so can you keep those muscles and those joints stabilized while you're actually executing all this other stuff that has to happen to hit the ball?
And let's talk about proper equipment and its role in injury prevention. Excuse me. Shoes, rackets. So how do you coach people on that? And how does that help reduce the risk of injury?
Oh, absolutely. Shoes. I mean, shoes are a huge one. I think people, tennis shoes, tennis specific shoes are low to the ground. They always have a hard rubber sole because they take quite a beating on the courts. And they'll have a very hard, wide toe box so that the outside edge of the shoe prevents rollover. Hopefully, keeps you from damaging your ankles, but also kind of keeps you planted to the court while you're shifting your weight around. Compared to like a running shoe, obviously, which is designed to go heel to toe, forward and backwards, straight lines, right? Or mostly just forward.
Movement in one plane of motion.
There you go. Right. And what we see a lot too is people come out with On Clouds or a shoe that has, and I guess this foam, these foam soles have now become they're a lot cheaper. So a lot of the brands are using a pure foam sole, and it's just much too soft. I mean, you see the shoe is not stable enough to support those quick starts and stops. So I think shoes are huge. I will always recommend a good tennis shoe for somebody when, even in the very first lesson. I'll make note of it within the first 5 or 10 minutes. Just say, oh, by the way, you're wearing on clouds. Be careful when you're moving, and let's get you into a pair of tennis shoes for next one. Mm-hmm. The rackets it's incredible advancement. The racket will do a lot of the work for you if you get the right one. And so that's another piece of, again, professional coaching and sort of knowing your industry. It's like, you got to know the pro shop side of it too. And I mean, all of my coaches, I mean, we have a whole training system for coaches that I hire. For my front desk staff here at the club has a whole, there's a whole series of training that they have to go through to match people with the right racket, to make sure that they're not, because if I put you put a 13-ounce racket in the hand of a beginner player, they're going to come back with tennis elbow in a matter of weeks.
Right.
Stuff like that is very important. So the technology and the materials of the racket have come a long way, but if you match them up on specs the wrong way, you will still do some damage. So you put, generally we put beginners on lighter rackets because their swings are not as fluid, up to much more advanced players can then use heavier and smaller frames that have more shock because their swings are more fluid. They don't feel that shock. So I mean, those, that kind of stuff is very important, and I train everybody that I work with on that stuff.
Nice. My racquetball racket is carbon fiber. Is that the material of choice for high-end tennis rackets as well?
Yes, certainly. Graphite is still the material of choice. I'll plug my own sponsorship brand. I'm sponsored by Head, and they actually own the patent for a material called graphene. Which is again, space age material. It's what's would be used in the theoretical space elevator that they will eventually build somewhere. Cool. But it's literally the strongest, lightest material ever devised by man. And so Head owns the patent to use that for tennis rackets, racquetball rackets, and pickleball paddles. And so that's, again, it is definitely still the standard. What they've started doing also is they now weave in dampening material into the graphite. So, there's materials, all trademark materials, but, Countervail was a big one that Wilson used. Crybon is the one that Head uses. And these materials are then woven into the graphite to help dampen shock. The Head's new series of rackets has auxetic graphite, where they actually weave it differently. Instead of being just a straight, 45-degree angle like you would imagine, or a 90-degree angle, sorry, like you would imagine, they weave a particular pattern where the graphite absorbs shock the same way that, imagine like a Chinese finger trap, when you put your fingers in it and then you pull and it tightens, but you push and it loosens. That's what auxetic structures do. So they're now weaving the graphite differently to create shock, a dampening effect because of the auxetic structure. It's super cool. And I know less about it than I'm sure it sounds like I know, but I've been coached to say all of that. And it is pretty amazing. Yeah.
When I was playing tennis, it was still like that. We were still in the age of like people making the gigantic rackets, and also remember the super thin ones. I had a couple of those Wilson ones that were only like a half an inch thick. You remember those things?
Oh my gosh, yes. And so and I mean that does those rackets that still exists on the highest end, right? So back then, like you were saying, like you're in your teens playing with a racket that I wouldn't recommend except for the highest levels. Like up to like college players are playing with rackets like that. Now, because the materials have changed so much, we can have some of those same effects. Like the reason that racket was so successful was because it was incredibly flexible, which gives you better control, but you also get, what's called a trampoline effect or more pocketing, which can be dangerous for the arm. And there's all these things, right? Mm-hmm. So, thicker tends to be stiffer, thinner tends to be more flexible. And that racket was an 85 square inch. Where, now sort of modern rackets have settled around 100 square inches. But yes, for a long time, like, even Agassi, when he was playing in the late 90s, was playing with a 107, which is oversized and would be considered ludicrous today on the tour. And I mean, they used to make them all the way up to in the 130 square inch, and now it's like most people have settled around 100 square inches as the ideal.
But they're all legal. They're all legal to use.
Yeah.
Ooh, there are limits. So
Okay.
135 is the actual limit.
Okay.
You there is no brand right now making a racket that big. They
Got
also there was a long time in the mid 90s where longer was better. Every brand came out with a longer racket. A tennis racket right now, most tennis rackets are 27 square inch or 27 inches long. And there are a few brands that make a 27 and a half or a 28. The rule is actually you can go up to 32, but a 32-inch racket, because you're now moving the weight farther from your arm, just destroyed people's arms. And people,
Right.
the long body and the extended rackets were really bad in the long run. It was a 5-year experiment that destroyed people's arms because they really couldn't handle the extra weight being moved even 1 inch farther from their hand.
Sounds like a baseball player. It's like a baseball bat.
Yeah. And baseball players are very particular about the size and weight of the bat in the same way that a tennis player should be. Yeah.
And they're hitting a lot fewer balls than a tennis player.
Right.
In the mid to late 90s, there was a lot of stuff in tennis and golf going on. It was just kind of bizarre. I remember that was when the tennis rackets and the golf drivers were getting just perpetually larger and larger and larger when Big Berthas first were popular. Yes. And I remember tennis started taking the exact same trend during the period.
Yep, and it's a reflection of the materials. I mean, they figured out graphite in the mid 80s. I mean, really, the development of graphite rackets didn't really come into its own until probably 1983, 84. By the late 80s is when you see the original Prince graphite really took over on the tour, and it was a 107 square inch racket. And then the one you're talking about, the Wilson Pro Staff, was a Kevlar. It actually had Kevlar woven into it. So it was a very thin racket being made stiffer by the Kevlar. But it really, sort of blossomed from there. And then people started experimenting. So it didn't take them long. It took them, 15 years to figure out, if you made that racket out of wood, obviously you'd hit one ball and the entire frame would snap and you'd be done. But as soon as they figured out they could, then they tried it and then figured out why they shouldn't. So sometimes you have to experiment with it, but a lot of people's elbows suffered.
So, Seth, if you were to give a piece of advice to somebody, let's say one of our listeners in their 40s or older, wants to take up tennis for the first time in their life, what advice would you give them? Where do you start?
Oh my gosh, start with the fun. It is tennis. Unfortunately, there are some financial barriers to entry, but you will absolutely have more fun in a coached class than you would getting on Facebook and saying, does anybody want to play beginner tennis with me? It is hard to play socially until you at least have some of the basics. So reach out to a coach, reach out to a public facility. Do they have beginner drills? Do they have a cardio tennis program? Do they have things like that where you can hit a lot of balls and be around other people? And it's, that kind of stuff is more important, I think, for a beginner than getting it exactly right off the bat. We have this whole notion of tactical before technical coaching. And so just go out there and play and figure it out. Like, can I make the ball go to my left or to my right? Can I even put the racket on the ball for the first time? But figure it out in a group environment and really try very hard. I know it can be intimidating and people don't want to make mistakes in a group environment, but good coaches also don't call you out for stuff like that. We don't do technical coaching in a group environment. We do technical coaching in private lessons or semi-private lessons. I'm not going to stop everything and say, hey, Rosemary, here's what's wrong with your forehand while all these 5 other people are waiting to hit their next ball. That those kinds of things are sort of gone from the coaching methodology. So that's the big one is find a group, find a coach who can lead you through some of that stuff and get around other people. Then, within a few months, you can certainly jump into social play. And that's where, you start to find your own, you find your own little clique and develop your own styles. But I think that's the part of it that really matters is getting around other people first and not just, I see it all the time. You can imagine my social media feed is a lot of tennis, but it's, people will put that out there and be like, I just started tennis. Does anybody want to go hit balls with me? And it's like, do you have a basket of 100 balls? Because if you're talking about going out there with a can of 3 balls and
Balls,
two
no fun.
beginner
Oh,
players, you are
they're
going
going to
to
vanish.
you're going to walk all well. I mean, even if you well, you may just hit them over the fence right away, or
Right.
you're going to spend 59 minutes walking around picking up the balls, and you're going to spend
Balls.
1 minute actually hitting. So
Right.
there's
Right.
pieces like that too, where for beginners, just going out and playing socially is hard. So find a coach, find a group,
Get a
and
coach.
yeah, definitely.
When we talk about getting a coach too, I think that's something. What do you recommend? You were in Nashville, which is not a super. There's not a tennis culture to speak of. It's not a large one here, I guess you could say. I would say Hendersonville kind of used to at least have one, but like where I am now, tennis desert for the most part, versus where I lived in Georgia when I was in high school. The reason I played tennis is our neighborhood had clay and hard courts in the subdivision within
Wow.
walking distance of my home.
That's amazing.
And that's the kind of difference of what you have in, say, the Atlanta area versus Nashville. We've got a couple rundown tennis courts in a park nearby here. So how do you recommend people track down a coach in a tennis program to get involved, especially if they live in a city that's maybe not a tennis culture city?
Definitely. I mean, fantastic question. I'll be happy to plug our professional organizations on this one. The PTR and the USPTA, which is now the RSPA, have websites of certified coaches, and you can do a coach search on zip code. You can do a coach search with however large of a radius you want. And you can find certified coaches in your area. Now, it's sort of a generic contact form where you can reach out to them, but moreover, you can see sort of where they're working too. A lot of the coaches' bios will also be available, so you can see, this facility has coaching near me or things like that too. Every city has public facilities with coaching. There's not one I can think of that doesn't have some form of public tennis. Now, Atlanta is a different animal because, like you said, every neighborhood has 10 courts, and it's absolutely wild. But the public facilities do keep us going, and USTA subsidizes a lot of public facilities. They subsidize a lot of public programs, and so look on the USTA's website also. USTA being sort of much more of a public forum, and then USPTA and PTR being those professional organizations where you can find certified coaches who have insurance, who have training, who have sort of those other pieces that you do want to look for, background checks and things like that. You can't be certified by either organization without background checks and safe sport training. So those are the places to start for sure. Facebook is probably not the place to go and just throw something out there and say, everybody recommend your best coach. That right. Can be dangerous sometimes, and you will end up with a lot of, my cousin played in college, you should pay him $20 an hour to be your coach. And it's like, you're much better off paying market price for a real coach than just whoever pops up.
And we will link to those resources in the blog at fitafter40.net. So if you're interested in learning more, we will provide those links. Seth, and I'm growing mindful of your time as we've gone a little bit over here, but such a great talk. If somebody is interested in contracting your coaching services personally, where do they find you?
Well, so right now I am the director of racket sports at a private country club here in Augusta. Like, you are welcome to move to Augusta and join our club, and absolutely, we'd love to have you. But I previously, before I moved in Atlanta, I started a company called Red Zone Racket Sports, kind of a take off my last name, Redelheim. So I have Red Zone Racket Sports on Facebook and Instagram, where I post coaching videos. There's, different kind of events and promotional things, but also stuff for my brand sponsors, Head and K-Swiss. I do a lot of their, branding and promotional stuff for them, as well as just general technical videos and fun things like that. So Red Zone Racket Sports is a place to start. Other ones that I love, I am always careful about recommending online sources because it is very easy to practice the wrong thing. But Essential Tennis is a really good one. It's a guy named Ian Westerman, who I was familiar with when I lived in Chicago. And then a guy named Connor Casey on Instagram is also hilarious. And he's tennis coach Connor Casey and does some great videos that are funny, but also very, very real in a lot of ways.
That's great.
Yep.
Right.
And keeping it entertaining is always a big help.
Oh my gosh, I know. I wish I had the reach that he does. He's got, I think, he's close to 100,000 followers on Instagram now, and his videos are so
Wow.
fantastic. So
Nice. That's great. Awesome. Well, Seth, thanks so much for taking the time to talk with us. I really appreciate this, and hopefully I'll get to see you on the court one of these days.
So it's been wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tony and Chris. It's been awesome. And yeah, I mean, if there's links that you want to put in for my Instagram or my email, you're certainly welcome to use them. And I look forward
you.
to anything that your listeners need.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
It was a lot of fun. It actually brought me back to my tennis playing good days, and I kind of want to get out on the court now after talking to you. I
know.
miss the sport. It was so much. It's such a fun sport, and I really encourage people listening to this to, if you haven't tried tennis, give tennis a try because it's just a lot of fun. If you like to play games and you want to be athletic, it's just perfect. Thank you.
There you go. Couldn't agree more, Tony. You got it.